I'm 29 years old, and I recently got a call from my mom. I hadn't talked to her in almost 5 years. She said she needed my help because my sister and her husband had just gone through a tragedy. Here's some background. The man who is now my sister's husband was once supposed to be my husband. My sister Melissa, who's 27, got together with my fiancé Lucas, 29, on the day of my engagement. Lucas and I had been together since college, and he proposed to me after almost 5 years of dating. He threw a surprise party for us on the night of our engagement. I remember feeling on top of the world until around 1 p.m. when I went out into the backyard for better reception and saw my sister all over Lucas. They were kissing so passionately that for the first couple of seconds, they didn't even notice me standing there shocked. I couldn't believe he would do this to me after nearly 5 years together, especially on the night of our engagement. When they finally noticed me, they broke apart instantly, but the damage was done. I ran to my car, drove to the nearest hotel, and hyperventilated from shock. I desperately hoped what I saw wasn't real. Then Melissa texted me, apologizing but confessing she was in love with Lucas, and this had been going on for a long time. I was alone in a hotel room when I got that text and broke down completely. Soon after, Lucas texted me with a similar apology, saying he proposed to me hoping it would help him forget Melissa. But it hadn't worked. He said it wasn't about me. They believed they were meant to be together. I realized I was just a temporary stand-in for Lucas until he could be with Melissa. I stayed at the hotel for a couple of days, trying to pull myself together. I felt like I was losing my mind, hoping this was all some cruel joke. After almost 4 days, I went back home because I needed to collect my things and couldn't risk losing my job. When I arrived home, I found out my family had been living with Lucas all this time, waiting for me to return. It would have been touching if it wasn't for how I had left. Everyone had been trying to reach me with texts while I was gone, but I hadn't responded to any of them. So when I finally returned, there was chaos. Everyone hugged me and told me how relieved they were to see me. Even Melissa came up to me, tears in her eyes, and hugged me tightly. I was too numb to react and stood there silently, while everyone surrounded me. Finally, after everyone had settled down, I cleared my throat and explained that I had returned only to pack my things and leave for good. Lucas had been silent until then, but when I mentioned moving out, he spoke up, saying he had already packed and planned to move in with Melissa now that everything was out in the open. To my surprise, my family, my parents, my aunt, and my dad's youngest sister were all smiling broadly despite the situation. Even though I couldn't see any reason to smile, they seemed happy. Melissa stood beside Lucas in an awkward hug, looking at me sadly but with a smile on her face. I couldn't bear it any longer. I asked my family why they were smiling. From my perspective, Melissa had just broken up my engagement and taken my boyfriend of nearly 5 years. There was nothing funny or sweet about what had happened. At that moment, my mother decided to speak up. She said they couldn't change the past but could accept the future, which now included Melissa and Lucas together. Even though their relationship started with betrayal, they felt sorry about it but believed it was for the best. Melissa apologized for taking Lucas from me and expressed regret that I found out this way. She explained they were deeply in love and wanted to be together forever. Then, right in front of me, they kissed, and my mother even wiped a tear from her eye. I couldn't hold back. I told them this wasn't a sentimental moment and their actions were disgusting. To my surprise, my family seemed annoyed with me. They accused me of being bratty and self-centered. Instead of being happy for Melissa, they said I was making everything about myself, and they didn't approve of my behavior. I was shocked by their attitude and immediately demanded everyone leave my house. I couldn't believe they were defending Melissa and Lucas while making me out to be the villain. They acted like my feelings were an overreaction. My father intervened, telling me to stop acting like a child and accept that these things happen. He wanted me to celebrate Melissa finding her soulmate instead of feeling jealous. Their behavior seemed insane to me, and I couldn't handle it anymore. So I decided to leave again without speaking to them or listening to their pleas. Even as they called after me, I kept going. I felt like there was nothing left to say because it was clear they cared more about Melissa's happiness than about me or what was right. They were so focused on justifying Melissa's actions that they forgot I was a person with real emotions. After that day, my family tried reaching out to me multiple times, but I chose not to respond because I didn't feel I owed them anything. A few weeks later, I even received an invitation to Melissa and Lucas's wedding, which I declined, of course. Many of our mutual friends also turned down the invitation in solidarity with me. Even some relatives who knew the truth stopped interacting with my family after seeing how they treated me. It's been 5 years now, and I've mostly cut them out of my life completely. They occasionally try to reconnect by sending me birthday or New Year wishes, but I always ignore them. I didn't block them, but I did remove them from my social media connections. Since my profiles are public, they can see what I'm doing, which is intentional. I want them to see that I'm living a great life and feel a pang of jealousy. It might be petty, but it's the least I can do after how they treated me. Until recently, I had little idea of what my family had been up to over the past few years. About 4 days ago, my mother called me from an unfamiliar number. When I recognized her voice, I almost hung up immediately, but she pleaded with me desperately for a chance to talk, saying they were in urgent need of help. Out of sheer humanity, I agreed to listen for a few minutes. She explained that Melissa and Lucas had started their own business a couple of years ago, but it was failing miserably. Investors were pulling out because of the lack of profit. They had borrowed more money in hopes of turning things around, but it only added to their debt. Now they were deeply in debt and facing pressure from loan sharks, employees, investors, and other creditors. My mother knew I lived a comfortable lifestyle and turned to me as a last resort, begging me to loan Melissa and Lucas money to pay off their debts. She asked for nearly $75,000. I questioned why Melissa hadn't asked me directly for help and why my mother was speaking for her. My mother explained that Melissa and Lucas didn't want her to approach me. They hadn't told me about their financial troubles because of our history from 5 years ago. Melissa wasn't ready to accept help from me, but my mother didn't know anyone else who could lend them such a large sum at short notice. A couple of months had passed, and Melissa and Lucas were struggling to make ends meet, even for basic necessities. My parents and Lucas's family were doing their best to support them, but their resources were limited. Both families were retired and needed to secure their own futures, so giving away their savings wasn't feasible. With no other options left, my mother called me to ask for help. I could afford to help them financially, but I didn't want to. Melissa was right not to ask me directly after what happened between us. They forfeited any right to expect anything from me when they betrayed me. I told my mother firmly that I couldn't and wouldn't help them. She sounded hurt and argued that I was being heartless and needed to think about our family. I replied that Melissa and Lucas didn't consider me when they had their affair, and my family didn't consider my feelings while supporting them. So I saw no reason to consider them now either. I had worked really hard to get where I am today, and I wasn't going to just give away $75,000 to people who didn't deserve it. Then my mom called and started crying, saying she never thought I'd become so selfish. She said my sister and her husband would be in big trouble if I didn't help them. I told her I couldn't help, and I hung up. Since then, my mom has been texting me nonstop, begging me to change my mind and think about my sister. She said it wasn't the time for revenge and that my sister was in serious trouble. She thinks I'll regret not helping her in the future. It's really stressful, and I don't know what to do because I don't want to be seen as the bad person. Am I wrong for not helping my sister financially after she stole my fiancé 5 years ago? Update. So I finally decided to block my family. I didn't do it sooner because I wanted them to see how well I was doing and maybe feel envious. Also, I worried I might regret cutting them off if something bad happened to them. But now, I just don't care. I should have cut ties with them 5 years ago. I don't know why I kept them around for so long. That was my mistake. Refusing to help my sister now isn't about being petty. It just makes sense. They've already wasted a lot of money, and even if I gave them some now, they probably wouldn't be able to pay it back. $75,000 is a lot of money even for someone like me who's doing well financially. If I lend that much, I expect it back even from close friends. But these people aren't close to me, and I can't count on them to repay me. So there's no reason for me to give them money. It's that simple. I talked to a few friends about it, and they agreed I made the right call. It's not about revenge, it's just not practical to help them after how they treated me in the past. Now that my mother can't contact me anymore, I don't have to worry about feeling guilty. Update 2. Hey everyone, something pretty intense happened today. I was at work when my neighbor called to say there was a couple outside my house causing a scene, yelling for me to come out and talk to them. She said they seemed unstable and had been there for an hour, refusing to leave. I asked for a description, and deep down, I knew it was Melissa and Lucas. My neighbor insisted I come home to handle the situation, and I agreed. With Melissa and Lucas, trouble always followed. I thanked her and rushed home to make sure they didn't get inside my house. I got home in about 15 minutes and caught them trying to break into my house by picking the lock. I parked in front of my place and asked them what they were doing. I tried to call the police, but Lucas knocked the phone out of my hand. Melissa then said they were only here to talk and didn't want anything from me, at least not right now. I told them to make it quick and insisted we stay outside in the yard. I didn't feel comfortable inviting them inside, especially since they seemed hostile despite claiming they didn't want anything from me. Melissa began speaking. She said my mother had told her about the phone call I ignored and how I had blocked them all. She accused me of being unfair and said it had been 5 years since the incident with my fiancé, so I should have moved on by now. She claimed I was acting dramatically to get attention from the family and felt insulted by my refusal to help them. That's why she wanted to talk to me. She explained that she had managed to gather the money this time by selling their house and jewelry, but she might need more in the future. Melissa said she needed assurance that I would be there to help again. I firmly told her no. I made it clear she couldn't rely on me because I deeply dislike her and her husband. I was so furious that I even mentioned how close I was to hitting her, so they should leave immediately. Then Lucas demanded that I sign a document promising to give them money whenever they asked. I couldn't believe it. I knew it wouldn't be legally binding if I signed it under duress. They were being unreasonable and seemed to think they could manipulate me into doing something like that. I ordered both of them to leave, but Melissa pushed me and insisted that I had to help them because we were family, and I couldn't avoid my responsibilities like this. I was shocked by her push, and I almost slapped her in response, but I managed to restrain myself because I knew it would only escalate things. Instead, I quickly grabbed my phone from the ground where Lucas had knocked it, and I ran to my car. I jumped in and drove off without even looking back. Since I had left the engine running earlier, I was able to speed away quickly. They didn't attempt to chase me on foot, so they stayed at my house, which was unfortunate for them. Once I was a safe distance away, I called the police and explained the situation. I hurried back home and arrived just in time for the police to show up. In less than 20 minutes, I gave them all the details, and they arrested Melissa and Lucas. I knew the charges might not be severe, but it was worth it to have them taken away and not have to deal with them anymore. It's been a few hours since then, and surprisingly, I haven't heard from anyone in my family. I thought someone might try to contact me from a different number by now, but they haven't. It makes me think they might be done with the situation and won't bother me again. Or maybe they're waiting for things to calm down before reaching out. Update 3. Hi, it's been about a week since my last update. I had started to think my family might leave me alone after I called the police on Melissa and Lucas. But I was wrong. They still found a way to bother me, and this time it was my parents who came to my house, asking if they could talk to me. This happened yesterday, and they seemed much more humble compared to Melissa and Lucas, so I allowed them in. My mother started crying as soon as she came in, apologizing for taking Melissa's side over mine in the past. My father said that after hearing about Melissa and Lucas getting arrested for their actions, including pushing me, they couldn't see them the same way anymore. They decided to cut them off. My mother continued crying throughout her visit while my father apologized for siding with Melissa instead of me in the past. I thanked them for finally realizing their mistake, but I explained that it was too late to repair our relationship. I've grown accustomed to living life on my own terms, and I'm not willing to prioritize my family over myself anymore. I appreciated their visit and apology, but I couldn't promise to work on our relationship. They tried to argue that we could fix things if we tried, but the truth was I no longer wanted to try. I just wanted to focus on myself. They seemed disappointed but eventually left, asking if I could at least unblock them so we could stay in touch. I've unblocked my parents now, which feels strange, but that's where things